My mental fortitude, my mental stability has only been made stronger by being here. I made the decision to come to China 4 months before I'd actually arrived. I decided that it was time for a change. Donald Trump had recently been elected in America, and on top of that, I was going through my own, internal issues, and I just needed a breather. I needed a venue, a way to get out, to experience, something that was different from what I had, grown used to. So I decided that, I'd apply everywhere. China was one of the places on the list. I originally was aiming for the Middle East, and then I discovered it's one of the most, the Gulf region specifically is one of the most competitive regions to teach ESL in the world. So China, Korea, Japan were the residual countries on my list, so I applied. China was presented the quickest results, so I decided, hey, you know what? I've never been here before. I'd never studied Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese. I had no exposure, so I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to get out and see something. I came to China with a very open mind. I knew, after doing some research, that things would not be as they were in America at home. It's obvious. But when I came here, I was not ready for certain things. For example, the interpersonal relations between Chinese people are very unique. So, for example, in public, Chinese people don't, typically greet or mingle with each other, through transit, through walking, through, the different opportunities that they might have to, interact. At home, in Chicago, sometimes you see somebody walking down the street that you don't know. You might say, hey, how are you doing? You might engage in, a very small conversation. Never seen that before once. I've been here 2.5 years. I've never seen that. More importantly, though, I was awe-stricken by the fact that people will stare at you for as long as they possibly can. Typically, at home, we don't stare, but even if we do, there's a time clock on it. After about 15 to 30 seconds, you've gleaned everything that you possibly can. Well, when I got on the metro the first few times, I remember, making eye contact with people, and minutes would pass by, and the same people that were looking at me when I first got on the metro were still looking at me when I got off. So that was definitely something that I had to adjust to. Rules are more of a suggestion here in some regards as it relates to like societal behavior. They're not necessarily reinforced the way that they would be in America. And I think that's what encourages the behavior. People are encouraged not to follow rules as much because they know that there isn't really, any consequences for not following the rules. For example, jaywalking, scooters and bikes on the sidewalks. So you see people who urine and, have bowel movements in trash cans. It's something that you really have to get used to, and it'll hit you, just like that. You might be walking down the street, minding your business, and then you turn and you see, an IE or a grandma with a child, and they are encouraging that child to, urine on the side of the road, in plain sight. So there are definitely subtle or more overt things like that you just have to adjust to. And it's part of having an open mind. You have to come here knowing that it will not be similar to what you've experienced at home. There are many things that I like about living here. One of the main reasons why I'm still here is safety. You learn that as a person, it's all arbitrary. So you have to rank what's important to you in terms of safety. So I prefer the safety of knowing that, I'm not gonna get robbed or mugged when I'm on the street. I'm not going to, have to worry about somebody trying to take advantage of me. So there's from a physical standpoint, there is an element of safety that's consistent. People just don't do that here. And sometimes it'll happen in, smaller areas, smaller towns and stuff like that. But the big areas, since I've been here, I've never had to worry about somebody trying to take advantage of me. Petty theft is something that exists, but it's not prevalent really at all. Holistically, I'd say that Chinese people are not that efficient, but there are particular areas within their lifestyle, within, society that, they are pretty efficient at. And that would be, things that directly affect them. So obviously, crowd control, the amount of people that live here, there are things that have to be set in place to keep people moving so that, venues and areas don't get overcrowded. Vending machines here that provide you with things, in a quick, timely fashion, whereas in America, you have to go and physically order it, from a human being. Everything isn't automated. For example, I went to the hospital because I was sick a few days ago, and after, the doctor took my blood work, took my vitals and everything, he, wrote my prescription, and we went downstairs to the main level to get my antibiotics. And my Chinese friend hands the attendant, the lady sitting, at the desk, a sheet, and she inputs some numbers into a computer, and behind her, we see like 3 containers of medicine drop from behind a glass window pane. And then they circle through this little conveyor belt and fall down directly in front of her, and she hands them to me. And I've never seen anything like that before. You'd never find that in America. They still do it, through human touch, through human contact. So payment systems. Everything is controlled for the most part through WeChat, Alipay, through basically one-stop shop apps. So on WeChat, you can pay for things, you can add people as friends, you can buy plane tickets, you can transfer money. You can walk out of your house with your phone and your apartment key and not need anything else. Whereas, in America, I walk out with my phone in my pocket, my credit cards, some extra cash, just in case my cars don't work. I walk out with my apartment key. Everything is really streamlined through the apps that people use here. So there's some things that I don't like. I think the first that I can mention is about how, people stare. So it's something that you just have to become acclimated with. So you kind of have to take a step back and, really check yourself and just realize that, it is rude, it is uncomfortable for you, but at the same time, you can use those as learning experiences for them, especially if you speak, Mandarin. You can say something to them, in a very calm manner, if they're not being rude or disrespectful, and, try to have a conversation about it. Like, why are you staring at me? I realize that I'm different, but at the same time, let's try to extend some courtesies here and not, point at you with your eyes wide open and mouth agape. So, it's something that I don't like. Another thing I'd have to say is, in general, people are sort of, and I'll say this because I want to remain respectful, people are careless, I think is the best way to put it. Sometimes people like to characterize Chinese people as rude and, sort of ignorant. And in some ways that is true, but I think a lot of it is they're careless, meaning some of that stems from the lack of education here. So, for example, if you're walking down the street, you might see a Chinese person, bump into another person, and they don't say anything. They might just look and keep going. And they don't present that sort of reaction because they're trying to be malicious or mean. No one has taught them that they should say, I'm sorry. Now, obviously, things are getting better. People, on the whole, I would say are not like that. It's not everybody. I wouldn't even say it's most, but I would say it's a lot. It's a lot of people. And, you get people that come from these really, poverty-stricken backgrounds, from really like educationally challenged areas where they haven't had the opportunity to, put into practice or even be taught, basic things. I was talking to one of my Chinese friends about this about 2 months ago, and she was saying, some of these people, growing up, they would do these behaviors and nobody checks them for it. Nobody tells them, hey, this is not how you do it this way. So, as a result, you find a great disparity between, the Chinese people who behave, the way that you would expect them to, and then the people who don't display that kind of behavior. It's actually quite a big disparity. I think I'd say the last thing that really irritates me is people's attention to their phones. So for example, you're walking outside to go to the metro. At the drop of a hat, a person in front of you could stop what they're doing and literally not slow down, but completely stop. You are right behind them, and as a result, you have to, finagle your way around them or try to avoid them just because, that's what you've been taught. You've been taught that as a child, you need, even if somebody does something like that, in order not to hurt them or harm yourself, you need to get out of the way. So you see a lot of accidents, you see a lot of people walking down on their phones, and the phone is so important that they would rather get hurt. I saw a guy walk into a wall because he was on his phone, like knocked his glasses off and everything because he was on his phone. He was so concentrated on his phone. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is pretty straightforward. It's a pretty easy concept, but it's just something that you continuously have to put into practice. And that's to A, not take yourself so seriously, and B, not to take the environment and the things around you so personally. As obviously as, a black dude here, a dark-skinned, relatively tall, big black dude here, you hear things, that people say overtly. The way we process and disperse, like, our feelings and stuff like that, we think first. We think about what we want to say. We consider how it will affect the person that, we're talking to, if we're talking about somebody or to someone. And, then we say it. So in China, people see and speak in one fluid motion. So I hear things all the time. And some of the first words that I learned while here were, tall, black, too dark, ugly, I've heard, strong. Like, I heard those things all the time. And it used to bug me at first. And I used to get really, really angry about it. And then that anger slowly turned into resentment. And then I think it was after the stage of resentment, it kind of, turned into apathy. And it went from apathy to an appreciation, because my mental fortitude, my mental stability has only been made stronger by being here. There is no way that you can live here and be sensitive. It's not gonna work for you, especially if you stand out. There are some, people of color that live here that, and foreigners in general, really, that live here that don't necessarily have to go through, some of the things that other foreigners have to go through. If you stand out though, things will be said about you, people will look at you. But I will say that being here has really made me stronger mentally. I don't get as, irritated now by things that people say. You just ignore it. You learn to ignore. And you learn that ignoring is really powerful, because you don't give the person saying whatever they're saying to you, you don't give them the opportunity to have any power over you. And then on top of that, you don't even have to dignify it with a response. You don't have to look at them. You don't have to say anything. You just go on about your business. And, that's that. And it's interesting that I actually learned this from other Chinese people. Some of my closest friends were telling me, they were like, when you hear that stuff, just ignore it. That's what we do. And, the person who's talking to you, if they know they can't get a reaction out of you, they're not going to get anything out of you, they'll stop. You know, it's that simple. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned being here. The biggest takeaway is, you know, not to be too sensitive, and, you know, just know that everything that sounds mean, that sounds hurtful, is not always that bad. As black men, particularly, black women as well, but I think particularly black men, you know, always being, you know, brutalized, sexualized in the media. You always think that when somebody says something about you that sounds remotely negative, that they're trying to, you know, come for you. They're trying to attack you. And that's not always the case. In terms of what I would tell someone coming over here, a person of color coming over here, someone who looks like me, I would tell you to, one, keep an open mind and be persistent with that open mind. Meaning, you have to know that things are not going to be, you know, the way that they were when you were at home. That's just not going to happen. There is a 0% chance that you will live a similar lifestyle. So with that in mind, you know, take it as an adventure. You know, I get up out of the bed every day, you know, wake up, and there are still times where I leave my apartment and I see things that, you know, I may have seen before in the past, but I just haven't seen in a long time, or in some cases, brand new things that, you know, just kind of baffle me. And, you know, you just kind of got to shrug your shoulders, laugh about it, and, you know, keep it moving. But I would say you have to keep an open mind, and you also need to, you know, smile. And that is something that, you know, as black men and women, people of color, you might hear that. And in America, if it comes from somebody who doesn't look like you, it might sound, you know, patronizing or condescending, but it's really something that will help you here. The unfortunate fact is that there are people here who are afraid of black people. There are people here that have preconceived notions about blacks, and as a result, you know, they have, you know, some sort of disdain, they have, you know, some sort of apathy that they might display towards you. And it's not everybody, but there are people here that are like that. And, you know, you can dispel all of those notions, all of that, you know, behavior that they think they might see from you by just giving a smile, you know, smiling, saying hello. And it's something that I still struggle with at this time, because, you know, there are days where you come, you know, home from work, where you're on your way to work and you don't feel like being bothered. You know, that's everybody. Everybody has days where they're just not into, you know, having to prove themselves or make themselves seem and appear more palatable. You get to points where, you know, you just want to be left alone. But even with that in mind, if you smile, in some cases people will leave you alone. In some cases people will, you know, be more friendly, you know, towards you. Stay positive and don't let everything get to you. And you can have fun here. You can have some great experiences here. You can have an opportunity to really expand your mind and really experience some things unlike what you've seen at home.